You are watching an episode in our Landlording A to Z series, where we walk you through the steps, skills, and challenges involved with residential rental real estate investing. We share our expert advice, including the tips, tricks, and strategies we've learned over years of managing rental property. Please subscribe to our channel to get notified each time a new episode comes out, and please like and share our content with people you know who might be interested. Thanks for watching.
Hi, you have Chris and Eli here. I'm Eli, that's Chris. We're landlord gurus, and today we're doing another episode in our Landlording A to Z series. Today we're going to talk about short-term rentals, and this is something that Chris has quite a bit of experience with. So we're just going to kind of hit some advantages and disadvantages of doing short-term rentals versus long-term rentals. So Chris, what's your experience been?
Yeah, so I have done some short-term rentals and, made a decision with a particular ADU to do a short-term rental instead of renting it out long-term. And there were a few reasons for that. And
What's an ADU, Chris?
Oh, sorry, accessory dwelling unit. So in our case, in-law, mother-in-law unit, they're often called, or
in the house.
Flat. In ours is
Separate.
in the house, exactly. Not
entirely separate unit, but in the house.
Right, exactly. So it's an apartment in the basement. Yeah, you'll often hear mother-in-law unit, that kind of thing. So,
yeah.
A detached ADU could be, a backyard cottage.
I have one of those.
Yeah. Right. So, we were thinking of renting it out, trying to decide whether we wanted to go long-term and have a sort of a permanent renter, a long-term renter in there on a standard traditional, 12-month lease, anything, or if we wanted to do a short-term, Airbnb. And so I figured, we decided at the time that we would do short-term rental. And so I guess in my mind, the advantages, I'll start with the advantages of short-term over long-term rentals. One is more revenue, potentially. So in our case, we were able to, when you charge on a nightly basis, and as long as you keep occupancy high enough that you can make more in revenue. There might be additional costs as well, but overall, it was beneficial in that way.
Did it end up being more?
It does end up being quite a bit more in our case on a nightly basis, especially, it's seasonal, obviously, in some places like here in Seattle, but definitely was the case in the summer months, but still overall year round was definitely the case.
Yeah.
Another reason is an advantage is flexibility. So in our case, we didn't want to have that apartment rented out all the time. We sometimes use it for ourselves. We sometimes have family coming to visit, other guests coming to visit. And so with a short-term rental, you can block out days that you don't want to rent it out. So that was a big thing as well. And that is a big advantage for short-term rentals for a lot of people.
Right.
And then the third is with short-term rentals, there are a lot of hosting platforms out there, Airbnb, VRBO, all those where you can list it there. They have a lot of tools where they can help with the pricing and do all kinds of things so that you don't have to understand quite as much, the way you might when you're doing a long-term rental and you got to know what that market rent is. And we've talked about, there are tools for that as well. But, we've talked about how to figure out the price, know what the price is, and things like that. So
there are some features as well where you're kind of or both parties, right? The person who's staying as well as the host. There are some forms of insurance where the platform wants to make sure that everybody has a good experience. Isn't there like stay coverage? So if something
there is,
put them up somewhere else.
What's that?
They'll put them up somewhere else if they have to, right? I mean, we talked about your sewer pump when the sewer pump went out, right? That wouldn't the platform put them up?
Yeah, exactly. So they stepped in and were able to help and kind of communicate both with us and with the renters just to kind of keep everybody happy and keep everybody in the loop, which was a great thing to have when you have those platforms that are there kind of working for you and they've, seen it all before. So they can definitely know what to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I guess I was going to stick with three, but I suppose a fourth is with long-term rentals. We've talked about all the different rules and regulations, the local laws about things to follow and leases and notices and everything else with long-term rentals. And so with short-term rentals, you don't have nearly as many.
Right. And it's different. You're not going through an entire process of, you're advertising on the platform, but then the screening is kind of done because.
In advance,
What's that?
Basically in advance.
In advance, right, by the platform.
Right.
Right. So you're not making this potentially kind of permanent decision about who's going to be in your rental. Here in Seattle, for example, we have just cause laws, which mean that you're required to offer an extension to a lease once you have a tenant. And there are exemptions to that. But it's a long-term and sometimes difficult to terminate, even if you want to, arrangement in some places these days. So You don't have that type of thing going on.
Right. Yeah. Just by nature, the guests are coming for, they know they're going to come for 3 days or whatever it is. And that's
Right.
everybody knows that going into it. So yeah, it can work out well in that aspect as well.
So another point though to keep in mind is that at least here in Seattle, the threshold is 28 days. So even if you're using one of these short-term rental platforms, if you have somebody that rents for more than 28 days, they're now considered by the city of Seattle to be a long-term renter. And then all of those laws are in place. And then suddenly you don't have a lease.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And with those platforms, you can set a maximum allowable visit, right, or allowable stay. So you're right. I knew that, and I did set my maximum as 28 days. So, or maybe 27 days is what I didn't be safe. But yeah, it's a good point.
So do you have some disadvantages for us, Chris?
Yeah. And so there are a few of those as well. It's not all roses with short-term rentals, but the first one is that with short-term rentals, you are now in the hospitality industry. You're not just in property management. You are trying to make sure those guests are happy, that they've got everything they need when, that they are able to get in, and, the TV is working, and that you've got the right furnishings and the decorations and things like that. So it becomes a little bit more than just simply being a landlord. So not everybody's cut out for that. Not everybody wants to do that.
The Wi-Fi better work.
Exactly. And I tell you, with cable TV and the remote controls and all those buttons, it's confusing even for me, and so to have somebody who's never used them before to then try and figure out how to get between Netflix and, whatever else can be confusing. So
yeah.
Second disadvantage in my mind is that it is not always a disadvantage, like we talked about before, but there are a lot of turnovers. So that people they come for 3 days or 5 days or however long it is, but you're when someone checks out and you're getting it ready for the next person to come in, you're doing this not once a year, like in a long-term rental, you're doing it, every few days. And so all the stuff that comes with that, whether it's cleaning, whether it's making sure things work, making sure everything is where it's supposed to be, that happens much, much more frequently with a short-term rental. So you got to be prepared for that.
Did people break things more than usual, do you think?
There's definitely more use, I think, more wear and tear. I don't know if it's
people moving in and out effectively.
I think so. Yeah. It's just, and it's not their home, right? With a long-term rental, if you've got a good tenant, a lot of them, they treat that space as if it's their own home, and they take care of it, and they maintain it, and they keep it up. With short-term rentals, I don't think there's quite that same attitude, right? It's I'm coming and I'm going.
Right. A little bit more like a hotel.
Yep. So you got to be prepared to handle that, and maybe that means hiring people to take care of it for you and clean it and things like that. So it could increase those expenses as well. And then lastly, we talked about the rules and regulations with the long-term rental, but there are rules and regulations with short-term rentals as well, depending on where you are. But like here in Seattle, you have to get a short-term operator's license, and you have to register your properties with the city. And some places don't allow you to have a short-term rental, or if they do, you have to meet certain requirements, or they've allowed short-term rentals several years ago and they've grandfathered those in, but no new ones are allowed. So there's a lot of different rules and regulations regarding that you got to be on top of as well, because if you're not, then those platforms might kick you off their platforms and you have nowhere to advertise, and you effectively don't have that option anymore. So.
Right. And which platform did you use?
Mostly Airbnb.
Yeah. And what were advantages to? Maybe there's probably a whole another video, but
that one versus other platforms. I think at the time, this was a long time ago, and they were sort of one of the first ones on the scene. And, and at the time, they came out and took photos for us. And
is that right?
Yeah. They had a professional photographer come out and take photos that we could use for the listing and things like that. So it was the first for us, and it was easy to get into, and it just sort of stayed there.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of operating your rental as a short-term rental instead of long-term. And if you have any of your own experiences that you'd like to share, I'm sure many of you do, as many people have done this. We'd love to have you share those in the comments. And we also would love it if you would share this channel or this video with anybody else you think might be interested, and like and subscribe so that you'll get notified when we do another one of these, and you can keep in the conversation with us. So we appreciate you watching, and we'll hope you come back next time.
Thanks, everyone.